Good evening, everyone. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the City of Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember DeBala.
Present.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Councilmember Hunt. Perfect. We can hear
Councilmember
you.
Small.
Chilling, never illing. Place to be for a while.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight for our last meeting before recess. There are no changes. There are no changes to the agenda. And just going to run through the agenda for tonight. So we will have, there are no matters for the record. We will have public comments on voting items, public comments on general public comments, council comments, and city manager comments. But for the voting session, we will be voting on the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 Stormwater Management Budget Amendment Number 1, the second reading ordinance approving FY 2024 Budget Amendment Number 1, the single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to sign a contract for the executive search firm to administer the recruitment of the new city manager, a resolution establishing the city council's goals and priorities for the management of the city. And then we have a consent agenda. The consent agenda includes a resolution providing for the city council summer recess, and that's August the 3rd through September the 6th. Resolution providing for reappointments to the Arts and Humanities Committee. A resolution providing for reappointments to the Board of Elections. Resolution providing for reappointments to the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs. Resolution providing for reappointments to the Emergency Preparedness Committee. Resolution providing for the reappointments to the Grants Review Committee. And the resolution providing for reappointments to the Recreation Committee. The resolution providing for reappointments to the Sustainable Maryland Committee, and the resolution providing for reappointments to the Tree Commission. We will also have a work session on the quarterly financial report for the fourth quarter. And so I'm not going to go through our upcoming agenda because it does not reconvene until September. We will save ourselves a little bit of time this evening by not having to go through that. So let's jump right into any public comments on voting items. Do we have any public comments on voting items? And please don't make me go through that list again. Do we have any public comments on voting items online? No. Okay, so everyone's here to wish us a farewell for recess. No? All right. All right. Do we have any any comments, general public comments this evening? Do you have any general public comments on non-voting items? Hold on one second. Let me get your mic together.
I'm
There you
here
go.
tonight to talk about the elephant in the room, the junction. Being totally transparent, I want you to know that I'm Karen Elrich from Ward 5. Being totally transparent, I want you to know that I'm one of the many who chose the first draft of what should be built at the junction and fought like hell when the developer got greedy, removed housing, decreased community space, and created a huge project that even the state highway couldn't pass. I was accused of being a NIMBY, old and white. I was accused of not wanting housing and development and wanting the old, ugly parking lot. And then things got uglier. These accusations were never said to my face, but strewn across social media, Facebook, Twitter, and listservs. Name-calling was rampant. Lines got drawn and sides were chosen and the battle began. Hours of 3-minute speeches lasting well beyond midnight, and protest in the streets was what I and many others used to be heard. We became a city seriously divided around the issue of development. and we never solved it. In fact, we never really discussed it. And here we are with a plan to do another development, a plan that has the potential of changing the face and possibly the soul of Tacoma Park. Do you agree with me? Well, I don't know. We haven't really worked out a way to have this type of back and forth discussion in Tacoma Park. We talk at each other, not with each other. I'm afraid we're headed down that same road. So my question to all of us, is there a different way we can do this? Where is our common ground? I think it's the development of the hospital site to include multi-use housing, which would include real affordable housing. Almost all the folks that I have talked with agree with that. So let's keep that in the plan and work with the Seventh-day Adventist folks to see what exciting things we can do here in Tacoma Park. Why does this plan include Maple Avenue, our most precious core of affordable housing in all of Montgomery County, all of Montgomery County? I see a plan that offers developer flexibility. I don't see protection for the residents. Do you? If so, please share that with us. Once given the new zoning that stops a developer from displacing residents of the smaller buildings, what stops a developer from displacing residents of the smaller buildings and building high-rises that will be unaffordable to those that live there now? There are two questions that must be answered with every action that we take as a city. How does this affect those most vulnerable in our city? And how does this address climate change? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments, general public comments?
Good evening, Sue Miller, Ward 3. The equity policies of both the city and county preclude going forward with the minor master plan as is. To do so would open the doors to massive displacement of Maple Avenue residents. Again, everyone is in favor of multifamily housing on the hospital site. The question is how Maple Avenue, our densest neighborhood, got targeted to shoulder the burden of dramatically increased additional density. And the very residents who could be displaced have not been a meaningful part of the process. This will be an equity tragedy. The obvious solution is to zone for new housing on the hospital site and leave Maple Avenue, an oasis of affordable housing in our county, out of the plan. I await a response to my request for information on the state of our legacy multifamily housing on Maple, on when the protections for that housing run out, and which buildings are vulnerable to demolition. And I await an explanation of how the city is going to protect our neighbors on Maple if this plan goes through. Feedback from residents so far does not support this plan. Residents were tempted by a pool, a bike path, a greenway, amenities for which there is no funding nor promise of reality. What residents need to see is a map of the specific open lots on Maple where new high-rises would go and the garden apartments that could be raised. Residents were not informed that new buildings would be exempt from rent stabilization for 5 years, and they were not informed that some 88% of the new units could be market rate. In terms of outreach, collecting sticky notes in response to the question, "Why do you like your neighborhood?" does not qualify as meaningful feedback. A flipboard from an outreach event at the farmers market actually did record these poignant responses. Do not displace residents. No giveaway to developers. But you will not hear that feedback at the upcoming citywide meeting because feedback won't actually be allowed. As for guardrails, unfortunately, no guardrails in a resolution can protect us. Once the zoning is set, developers absolutely have the right to build to the maximum, period. The only way to improve the plan is to change the boundaries and/or change the proposed zoning designations. I appreciate that you all inherited a plan rolled out at the height of the pandemic, followed by turbulent changes in county and city staff. I apologize that many of us did not understand this plan until so late in the process, and I am truly sorry that this is impinging on your much-needed break. But we must create a better plan. Thank you.
Do you have any other general public comments?
Start my time right on time. Good evening, Paul Huebner, Ward 3. I'm presenting these comments about the minor master plan on behalf of Paul Krastowski, a Tacoma Park resident and a recognized expert in environmental engineering and science. He was unable to attend tonight's meeting. On March 13, 2019, the city of Tacoma Park declared a climate emergency. This was followed by a climate emergency response framework in 2020 that resolved, quote, the city of Tacoma Park will continue to move aggressively to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, end quote. Council has repeatedly stated that one of the city's priorities is an environmentally sustainable community, which includes climate change mitigation, achieving net zero, climate change resilience, and natural resource sustainability. Sustainability and growth may be viewed as two sides of the development coin, or better yet, as factors that need to be in balance. In the case of the MMPA development plans, the scales are out of balance, resulting in growth outweighing sustainability. If this proposal is allowed to proceed as written, it will not be possible for Tacoma Park to achieve the council's own priorities. In the Environment Appendix D of the MMPA draft, we were promised a climate assessment for this plan in late June or July. This assessment has not been published as of August 1, and the Planning Department has not yet responded to his questions about its availability. Because of this, I did my own calculations using data from the U.S. Census and the Tacoma Park Greenhouse Gas Inventory. My calculations show that once this development is built, it could result in the generation of 64,500 metric tons. That's 141 million pounds of greenhouse gases annually. In addition, 40% of the greenhouse gases from buildings come from construction, which along with demolition and disposal of the existing structures will result in even more greenhouse gases. It will be impossible for Tacoma Park to achieve net zero emissions by 2035 if this plan goes forward as written. Similar calculations show that implementation of this plan will also result in the council's other sustainability priorities failing. For example, the proposed tree canopy in the MMPA is only 45%, well below the existing average city canopy of 58%. The choice is yours. You can bring things back into balance by approving an alternative, climate-friendly project for this area that also meets social goals, or you can surrender sustainability to growth by approving the MMPA plan and abandon your own priorities. Paul later told me that he heard from the planning board yesterday and that the climate
Thank you, Mr.
assessment
Huber.
will
Your
not be
time is up.
publicly available
Thank you
before
very
the
much.
September 14th deadline.
I think we have a lot of other people behind you. Do we have any other general public comments?
My name is Jacqueline Moore, and I live in Ward 2. I would like to preface my remarks by stating that I am 100% in favor of creating affordable housing on the Washington Avenue site. I do have questions and concerns about the ways in which the minor master plan may affect the residents who live on the Maple Avenue corridor in the multifamily buildings on Maple between Sligo Creek Parkway and Philadelphia Avenue. The minor master plan amendment is intended, in words of the planning board to city staff and council, to create maximum development flexibility. That is an invitation to maximize profit, not to meet people's needs. Keep in mind that community input is different from community engagement. In addition, the bulk of the community outreach was done during the height of the pandemic when people were reticent to respond due to the stressors on themselves and their families. No one was advised as to what the zoning changes would entail, therefore they could not give input on this most important aspect of the MMPA. Beginning on page 27 of Amendment A of the Minor Master Plan, Appendix B, there's a series of tables titled Response Categories and Topics. If you look at these numbers, they are minuscule compared with the actual number of people who live on the Maple Avenue corridor area, or in that area. While it is fine to assess the items in these tables, the numbers are too small to be relevant. You do not yet have the facts you need. The most important unasked question is, how do you feel about the proposed zoning for Maple Avenue that permits 12 and 15-story buildings? Last night, I spoke with approximately 50 individuals who attended the National Night Out event at Piney Branch Elementary School. The bulk of the people I spoke with have lived in the area for at least 10 years, and some have lived on Maple for as long as 50 and 60 years. Not one single person knew anything about the minor master plan for Tacoma Park and the plans for the Maple Avenue corridor. Not one. If a market exists and financing is available to developers, it can be reliably predicted that developers will seek to replace low-rise buildings with tall buildings. There are several existing 3 to 8-story buildings along Maple Avenue right now. Rather than letting them all be snatched up by developers, would it be possible to cooperate with groups like Habitat for Humanity to build structures that will accommodate a lot of people at an affordable price point? When residents are displaced, where will they go? What will new apartments cost with the coming of the Purple Line, current convenient access to Metro, good schools, and a new and improved Maple Avenue Corridor Greenway? Another important question that was not posed to residents is what about the infill construction that's also called for in the amendment? Currently, there are parking lots and green space, some of which could be built on if the amendment is adopted. In addition, what is the potential impact of these changes on current residents? Has anyone thought that through? Developed a contingency plan? Will displaced residents to be able to afford any of the new apartments? This is no time to adopt the minor master plan amendment for Tacoma Park as it is written. Please vote to oppose it in its current form. You, the City Council, have the power to put on the brakes and to get the best deal possible for the city residents.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments? And can we make sure that Tom gets 5 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me, Tom Gagliardo, your neighbor. You're my neighbor. I'm your neighbor. We're all neighbors. It's important to keep that in mind. Before I begin my prepared remarks, I want to draw to your attention a November 2022 article in the Washington Post. Read one paragraph from it. It's a comment by the Purple Line Corridor Coalition. I don't know who they are. If anybody's there knows me, it's news to me. Here's what they say. Without intervention, the coalition says rising land values around stations, meaning the Purple Line stations, leads to higher rents and will price out local, I can't read without my glasses these days. Without intervention, the coalition says rising land values around stations lead to higher rents and price out local businesses and residents, including lower income workers most in need of faster, more reliable mass transit. So I've said this before, we're all in this together. The minor master plan will impact our community for generations. We, not you, not us, we need to get this right. More than a year ago, I wrote to a senior Montgomery County planner and said, quote, I strongly suggest that it is in the interest of all stakeholders to engage in a candid discussion about the owner's plans with the objective of assessing the impact of those plans on all of the surrounding neighborhoods. That email was copied to any number of public officials. No discussion has ever occurred. Karen Elrich's remarks tonight are the single most important remarks made during the entire time the minor master plan amendment has been under consideration. It's not too late what she has laid out for us. Let's do it. The community has not been engaged in the process. To say otherwise is disingenuous and misleading. Jackie Moore explained this to you. She's right. I've repeatedly urged you, as our elected officials, to proactively engage Adventist Healthcare and University, the owners of the property, and more than once suggested that the city explore issuing tax-free bonds to assist in financing their efforts. No one has ever responded. I support the inclusion of workforce, affordable, and missing middle housing. I support building multifamily housing. I support zoning changes to make this possible. But I question the need to zone the area for town center residential and commercial development. Emphasis on town center. The most persuasive arguments presented to you last week were from our neighbors. Bob Dreyer spoke of weighing the pros and cons of alternative approaches, which is critical to effective decision making. If that's been done, it hasn't been shared with the public. Denise Jones, who lives on Maple Avenue, and John Rogers spoke of potential displacement of our neighbors who currently live on Maple Avenue. This is a serious concern, and I and others expect each of you to pledge your every effort to prevent that from happening and to stand with our neighbors if it does. The public needs specific information on proposed zoning changes, what is permitted if the zoning is approved, and the anticipated impact of those changes. Do not ignore the fact that since specifics were revealed, there has been considerable pushback, concern, and a call that the plan as drafted be opposed. Emphasis on as drafted. I know each of you is a person with good intentions who wants to do the right thing. I've said that at least twice before. Let me say it a third time. But what President Lyndon Johnson said and reminds us, quote, doing the right thing is not the problem. Knowing what the right thing is, that's the challenge. And that's the challenge we face here. We're all in this together. We've got to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Hello, Council. So excited that you get a month off for recess. And last week, the Masters of Public Health intern, Ellie Brandenburg, presented you with 6 cities worth of information about how community art can happen and how other municipalities have made community art a priority and something that brings people together. Now, what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes is not as weighty as the climate zero goals that my neighbor spoke about, or the minor master plan, which I agree with the previous speakers. But what I'm going to talk about is about community art, and that's not to minimize it. What community art can do is bring together people to achieve some of these goals that are much bigger and much tougher to solve. So my daughter's holding up pictures just in case anyone didn't see or maybe forgot what the movement sidewalk and what the community art project on Lincoln Avenue looked like during the pandemic for several years until someone labeled it graffiti. And it was power washed 11 months ago by this city. And this body was in recess, so we couldn't come and make a speech about it then. But it went forward, and now we have the opportunity to do more. It's a new school year, more safe routes to school, more movement, more being outside, more nature education, more community working together, more kids seeing their dreams every day in paint on the sidewalk. It's been a real loss for our community to not have those inspiring things look at us every day. And frankly, it's a real puzzle why you as politicians wouldn't take an issue that's like really popular, no cost, low cost, brings people together, beautifies the community, makes Tacoma cooler. Real mystery as to why you would not be out in front supporting this or supporting your residents who want to make this happen. So I didn't know whether to ask for permission or ask for forgiveness or ask for what from you all. I've tried both ways and it hasn't really worked out, so I'm just going to be transparent. My daughter's going off to college in a month, and I'm going to need a project. So I'm pledging to you all that I'm going to hear from kids that have wanted to make a difference, wanted to make more movement sidewalks and community art, and I'm going to listen to them, and I'm going to ask them what they would like to see. And I propose that we as Tacoma Park embrace pilot projects, maybe in each ward. We have one city for each ward. We could follow their guidelines since we haven't made any of our own yet and see how it turns out. All that paint's gonna wash away anyway. Why not let kids' dreams be on the sidewalk for a year while we test some things out? So Tacoma Park, I challenge you to accept my transparency, unleash our collective creativity, and come together on some of the things the public space management plan does specifically talk about with regards to these goals, and let us be the residents that we want to be in Tacoma Park.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments?
Okay. Hi, my name is Indigo. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm currently a rising senior at Smith College in Massachusetts. I've done work on many of the iterations of the murals on Lincoln Avenue that Susan was just talking about. And the first one I helped with was in summer 2021 when the pandemic was still in full swing. And I had just finished my first year of college. It was all virtual, and it was actually a little scary to step back from constant Zooms into a space where there would be groups of people all working together on one project. But I chose to go anyway because I knew how important the project could be to kids who had been cooped up in their houses during the pandemic and were looking for something to do, especially because some playgrounds had been closed off in the area. So there were so many kids who I'd never met before who were outside. They were playing hopscotch on the obstacle course we had made. They were adding to the paintings of planets and native flowers. And I really saw in real time their eyes light up with the chance to contribute to this project. And I think that's why so many of them came back like the next year and the next year. And they were passionate about the art, and there was so much like joy in it for them. And in my life now, it scares me a little bit how much time I spend on screens. And throughout public school, I witnessed the shift to more screen-based learning. The Chromebooks were just ever present, and you needed a Chromebook to do your homework, your tests, just like everything. So I know it's hypocritical of me, like 21-year-old, to say that I think children need more activities that are not on screens. But based on what I see when I look around, I think that's really true. And so, instead of people staying indoors, I imagine mural days on weekends in the summer with kids running around, screaming, laughing, playing, getting messy, their little red and pink and blue fingerprints decorating what used to be dull concrete. I imagine murals that depict the history of this town and proudly state its status as a sanctuary city. There could be little puzzles and games on buildings and beneath your feet. There could be scavenger hunts or a map of all the little free libraries in the town or educational artwork of native plants and pollinators. And lastly, it's really hard seeing something you created being power washed away because of a rule you were too young to vote for when it came up. It's hard watching a hand-painted trans flag fade and vanish under a relentless torrent of water. Another reason community gatherings are so important is that people meet people that are different from them, and they realize, hey, we're all human. We're kind of all in this together, just trying to get through it. And in this day and age, I think that's really important to remember our shared humanity and how good human, in-person contact can feel. So all this to say, please consider and support students' proposal for public artwork. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments? Come on down.
I'm Richard Masterson on Roanoke Avenue, Ward 5. And on the minor master plan, I have some comments, maybe philosophical, but I consider them important. It's kind of an expression of my purpose of living. We, the residents and electors of Tacoma Park, appreciate the good government we have and all that they can do for us. We are proud of the representatives we've put into office on the City Council. We want all people to thrive. Businesses and corporations that exist by the licensing we have given them are included in our aspirations for a better life for ourselves and the next 500 generations. The Minor Master Plan is an instrument that will set guidance for physical planning and building for our nearby community. It gives us an opportunity to consider our desires for the future, living with the resources we have and anticipate. Anything set up in this document will express the desires of those offering input and the approval votes of our elected representatives. The people will want to protect their homes, and the developer will want to maximize corporate profit. The corporations we have licensed have a legal obligation to generate generous profit. People would be naive to think real estate and investment corporations are focused on providing for the needs and wishes of the people. People and representatives who speak up at these meetings will prevail. We've not made it a provision of corporate license to serve the consumer yet. Approval of the Minor Master Plan will require a broad spectrum of input and analysis because of the acreage, population, and resources involved. Laws will be made based on whatever we approve here. This is not just a wish list, and we need a climate change report included. The more mundane includes building heights, and if we do not want concrete canyons created by 12-story buildings, but we accept 4 or 6 stories, we need to put that down in this document. Corporations may not reap additional profit from the top floors that cost less once the foundation is built, but the apartments are not being built for profit. Shorter buildings do not force an economic loss on corporations. It simply puts a limit on what they can build, and they will calculate the financing. Buildings are not for the financiers. They are for the inhabitants. They're for the people. We, the people, desire housing. If we want to provide denser housing and for a significant population increase, we need to understand that it all comes with other things.
Thank you. Your time is up.
3,500 people could support a grocery store.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Do we have any other general public comments?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Marguerite Sear, and I live in Ward 2. Tonight I'm here to discuss the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan. I will not urge you to not sign anything that you don't fully understand or have answers for, because that's just common sense, but to remind you of the promise that the Council made to its residents in 2019. With last week's temperatures greater than 100, winds gusting at 40 miles per hour, and intense rainstorms fresh in our minds, this is a good time to urge you to recommit to that promise. On March 3rd in 2019, the Council of Tacoma Park declared a climate emergency, stating that we dedicate ourselves to aggressive actions regarding climate adaptation and resilience. The document acknowledges record rainfall, flooding, stormwater issues, and the expectation of future severe weather events. It prioritizes building an environmentally sustainable community, identifies residential and commercial buildings as the largest contributors of greenhouse gases. It commits to integrating low-income and racial equity with the transition towards renewable energy, and declares that Tacoma Park will achieve net zero emissions by 2035 and be fossil-free by 2045. So with this declaration in mind, I encourage you to question whether building on Maple Avenue, which is a covered riverbed, is going to enhance resilience and economic and racial equity in Tacoma Park when record-breaking rains already put Maple Avenue underwater. Question whether extreme runoff from Maple Avenue flooding will damage the water quality of Sligo Creek and potentially harm its fragile inhabitants. Questioned whether increasing the carbon footprint of Tacoma Park via a substantial increase in population, large construction projects, and increase in gas emissions from gridlock traffic is within the parameters of this declaration. And question whether decreasing permeable green space and canopy trees with their ability to produce oxygen, store carbon, and absorb runoff is a fair exchange for more parking lots and buildings, and ask whether it will help or hinder climate warming effects. Just as urban policies and city plans apply the social determinants of health to achieve the best results in a community plan, so do we need to examine this minor master plan through an environmental lens. I'm not against development in Tacoma Park, but what happens here needs to adhere to the priorities and vision set by the Council itself when it declared a climate emergency. Please review this plan with the same fervor that you had when you declared a climate emergency. Please do not sign off until you reconcile our priorities with the new plan. Reject the CRT and prepare a city for a rocky future that we all know is lying ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments? Going once. I'm not trying to be here all night. Line up.
Might be a little slow getting up, but hi,
Thank
good
you.
evening. My name is Jim Barnes. I'm a 21-year resident of Ward 5 on Maple Avenue, immediately adjacent to what we currently call Hospital Hill. In asking this council to oppose the proposed rezoning, I'd ask you to honor the hopes, the plans, the investments of the current residents living along the periphery. Bluntly, we invested in homes without 15-story buildings towering over our roofs. I have 3 young daughters. I'm hoping someday they're going to want to live where we're living now, or at least one of them maybe. We'll see. But I would ask you to do everything you can to modify the existing plans to create more sensible restrictions on the periphery especially. I'm not saying don't build, we're just saying build smarter. This seems like a very aggressive set of rezoning to give them the maximum opportunity to really just throw up honking huge buildings where we currently live. So I'm just asking for your consideration here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments? Come on down, Ms. Machui. Don't run. You don't have to run. I'll wait for you.
Thank you. Ward 2. Hi, I've started Parents of Special Needs Adults in 2015, and I'd like to thank the mayor and Shauna and Cindy for speaking with me then. I guess it was just last night, was it? Wow. It was nice to see all the people having a good time, especially the children. But we're still the most vulnerable group. We talk about vulnerable people. If you have disabilities affect your brains, you're the most vulnerable people. And no matter what race, nationality, or sexual orientation you are, you've got that. My son is biracial. One of the reasons I moved here, that neighborhood on Boyd Avenue was a lot more people from different races. Unfortunately, it's becoming more and more upper middle class white, younger people. I have a good friend who lives on my block who has three living children, and none of them are going to move in with her because they said they can't afford living here. They're living in Georgia. She's from North Carolina. It really hurts me, and the people next door are probably going to be moving out. All the black people I know of pretty much on my block, except for one, all the children are moving out. They're having low-income jobs, like my son, who's a doorman. My son will never, partly because of his race, partly because of his disability, he will never, ever probably make enough money. He'll probably end up living in his car if he has a car then. And it's the truth. I'm telling you the truth. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments? Going once. All right, come on down.
Hi there. Am I ready to start? There's no timer. Okay. Troy Jacobs, Ward 5, and I am ground zero for the mini master plan. I live in the catchment area. And what I'm going to give to you in terms of news is actually not anything for or against the plan, but in fact, I've been in communication with the planning board about receiving testimony, written and oral, particularly given that the catchment area and Tacoma Park, Tacoma Park on average is 40% non-English speaking, limited English proficiency. And so of concern to potentially disenfranchising a segment of our population, I have been pursuing what we can do in terms of getting these voices that are not represented in city council meetings or in public hearings at the hearings. And so this is the response from the chair. It's thanking, I'm not going to read all of it, but I will read that in fact, yes, speakers can speak in any language, and accommodations will need to be made at least 5 days in advance of the scheduled meeting in September. And what is critical is that there's been a change in terms of the written testimony, and the written testimony can now be submitted in any language. We will have the comments translated into English for the board to review and be entered into the record. Please note that the deadline to submit such written comments to the chair's office would be 12 p.m. noon the day before the meeting, which would be September 13th. And so I think that that's important information for whether you're in support of the plan or opposed to the plan. but to get these voices, Spanish, Tigrinya, or Ramifa, Amharic, I mean, whatever, to the table to hear what they are thinking in terms of the mini master plan. I am supportive of the process that has gone forward, and I hope that the council will be supportive of the process. I mean, this is a long process that will unfold, and this is the thing, is that, you know, whether we're talking about 3,000 extra houses in Tacoma Park, or, you know, whatever the changes in terms of housing
Thank you very
and
much.
businesses.
Your time is up.
It's going to be a long process.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'm going to ask the Mayor Pro Tem to hold down the fort for a quick second because I am losing a contact. So do we have any other general comments in the audience? Perfect. Come on down.
Yeah. Check, check. Okay, hi. Dennis Flynn, I'm a local homeowner in Ward 5 and also a business owner in the Washington Adventist Professional Building. Pretty excited about the plan, potential for town center. Attracting, you know, increased franchise business and other businesses, supporting smaller businesses to come into that area, as well as new residential opportunities. Just kind of wondering what the plan is for the professional building adjacent that's on Carroll Ave, as a business owner there. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other general comments? As she says, come on down.
I press this?
No, you're good.
Okay. My name is Stephen McGarry. I'm here with my wife, Susan Scomal. We live on Flower Avenue, 8112, and we are very concerned about what we have read in the mini master plan, simply because it seems like it does not address at all the fact of the congestion that will be inevitable with this much growth. Flower Avenue, Carroll Avenue are more or less at capacity now. The idea of adding a significant load to those streets just seems to be irresponsible to me. It's just begging for problems. And that's really our only, I'm not anti-growth, but I think we need to consider that when we add population, when we add buildings, we have to add the access to those. And frankly, it's pretty hard to get in and out of Tacoma Park right now. And it's going to be a lot harder with a lot more traffic. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment?
I'm Glenda Capsalis. I live in Ward 1. The only thing I want to say about this is I use that park all the time, biking, walking, hill climbing. It's very important to a lot of the older people to be able to exercise in that park. And to think of riding a bike down Maple Avenue once this kind of development takes place, it's not going to be safe. And the development up on the Adventist property is going to drip over into the park, the paths that go down the park. It's going to change the nature of Sligo Creek Park tremendously. And I'm all in favor of the housing that's, you know, affordable, et cetera. And it's just a personal thing about the park. A lot of us exercise in the park. and we go there for the peace and quiet to get away. That's all.
All right, do we have any other general public comments? While I can still see you. All right, awesome. Do we have any comments online?
We do have one commenter online where we should. No, apparently didn't show up.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to council comments. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. Jesse, if you could put 5 up there, that would be great. A couple of good things and whatnot, but I just wanted to say that I wanted to begin and end in the same place or theory, and that was Jive Fresh, for the premise that nobody should be prevented from being the person who gets to sit up here. And so, begin and end in the same place. I also began and ended with some quotes. So I will read a quote. This is from Thomas Paine. It says, men who look upon themselves as born to reign and others to obey soon grow insolent. Selected from the rest of mankind, their minds are early poisoned by importance, and the world they act in differs so materially from the world at large that they have but little opportunity of knowing its true interest. And when they succeed to the government, are frequently the most ignorant and unfit of any throughout the dominions. Thomas Paine, 1976, or 1776, rather. 1976, I was 3. So I begin and end with a quote of some degree of tension for a reason, and that is that I am really looking forward to this recess. And part of the reason for that is that beginning and ending in the same place. We began this process this year with a flyer about the development that isn't in our jurisdiction, that's not all that tall, that was untrue. And then yesterday, not everybody's flyers were untrue, I'm sure, but the one that I saw was fundamentally untrue. I have a pretty good background in these things, having been a city manager, and I can read. Then last night, I was at the National Night Out. I've put together a couple of those. And so I was walking around there, and somebody handed me a flyer, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh, man, this flyer is untrue again. So it was good to for the theme. And I think that that's important because when I look in the room and I see 30 people or so here, I'd like to reiterate that I have already said that I, for one, am not interested in voting for this minor master plan amendment as constructed based on my previous experience as a city manager and my understanding as a lawyer in reading the documents and or whatever pro formas may be available. As such, I find it annoying and tiring that people come in here and both lie about things that are super important to get people riled up and yell at people who are really actually have already broken backs at park and planning on this issue. And so I would like to close with the premise that I sincerely appreciate the number of people that are from different wards that are interested in the minor master plan and the traffic associated with it and things like that. I really do. I live in Ward 6. It's right next to me. I drive past there every day. I drive through there every day. And I also drive through my neighborhood every day. And I was thankful that we finally had a public meeting. Thankful for David Uvag's acting city manager, who is currently being raised in the style that most or all of the people who we are going to pay an exorbitant amount of money for think you should get a city manager for the benefit of whatever process is important for that. And at that meeting, there was a full room of people, maybe 50 people in the long run, who all talked about how horrible it is to live on a street that, even though the data says, oh, well, you know, people really only go 25 miles an hour, or, oh, well, we really have a squeaky wheel scenario here, that 17,000 cars drive on every week. And it's been like that for ages. And I sat through an almost 2-hour report about trees with some quibbling about whether or not this oak or that oak were the same oak. And I also have witnessed a lot of people carry water for people that they don't talk to. Or I've witnessed a lot of people express a lot of concern about traffic suddenly when the purple line has been an abysmal process for Ward 6 for years. And so I charge you to consider a premise about aristocracy and what it means to think that people are not capable of reading or seeing the same things that you see, or taking care of those things on behalf of a democratically elected government. Because I have been made to be crazy by people in this room and by staff and any number of things for trying to get people to pay attention to the fact that 17,000 cars on a street that doesn't get any speed bumps or chicanes or anything because of the squeaky wheel process that accommodates you is cool. It's not cool. It's not cool to come in here and lie on people. It's not cool to come in here and say things that aren't true. And it's not cool to pretend like you care about people or things when there are people or things that could have been cared about on the very same set of issues that you never bothered to notice before.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson.
Thanks for all the many speakers on both the public art as well as the minor master plan. Someone said that, I think it was quoting Johnson, and it's knowing the right thing. Well, that's what I'm trying to do, to know what the right thing is, and right now I don't. So I continue to dig in, ask questions, and I need to listen to my constituents and my colleagues and more people, because I'm really not clear about the scale, the implications of the minor master plan. There are some really, really difficult or consequential issues that have been shared in terms of people being evicted, or people being unable to stay in their homes, about our environment, about traffic. And I appreciate the level of concern and commitment of all of you coming out. I want to say that several of us on the council here will be holding a listening session. It's being in the planning stage on August 16th, right here at 7 p.m. So we'll get the word out. We want to hear. We want to share what we do know, and we'll try and find out even more. But that's another opportunity for us to fill out and find out what the right thing to do is. I dedicate myself to doing my best at that and making my vote count. So thank you for being here, all of you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a minute and thank the city manager and the police department for the great National Night Out program last evening. It was, I think, in my long term here at the city council, I think it was the best or one of the best National Night Out programs that we've had. A great deal of that has to do with the turnout and really the outreach that was done to bring people to the event. But they were also assisted by fantastic weather for a nice picnic, if you will. I think the only glitch I saw was that it was so well attended that they ran out of food before people ran out of appetite. And then I also wanted to take this minute to thank Pat Rumbaugh and Let's Play America for the pop-up play event we had this morning at Hefner Park. I really want to thank her for all the effort and to the young people that came with her to help play with the kids. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. Gosh, a few things. I had asked the acting city manager later on in his comments to address a couple of topics, such as the Belford Avenue sidewalk schedule and the impact of the storms this past weekend. But I want to take this moment before we get to the committee's topic on the agenda to just let everybody know that we are extending the deadline for the youth council through the end of August. So anybody out there who's about to be in middle or high school and wants to be on the city youth council, the deadline for that is now Labor Day. So Labor Day?
Go a little bit earlier than that,
Okay.
because you need time to review.
Right, okay, so end of August.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for correcting me. I also want to thank people who came out and talked about the minor master plan today, and all the people who have contacted me in other ways. And I wanted to echo the information session that we are planning to have on Wednesday, August 16th, here in this building, 7 o'clock. Again, 4 questions to answer questions, for us to ask our questions, get more information. I feel called upon to remind everyone what we talked about last week. This is the comment period. The council is not approving, disapproving, or anything like that for quite a while. This is about resident comments to the county planning board, city council comments to the county planning board. That's where we are in the process. All of the points you've made, I sure hope you write them down and send them into the county planning board. Because telling us is one thing, telling the folks who get to make the changes during work sessions once the public comment period is closed is quite another. So just wanted to point that out. And I wanted to follow up on one of the points that a couple of times today, the climate assessments. So I looked into this today, and do you want to talk about this? I asked the city staff some questions about the actual status of the climate assessment, what the county law requires,
Sure.
who has to do what, and when they have to do it.
Yeah,
So
I can read a statement from HCD if
I would
that's helpful.
appreciate that,
Sure.
yeah, because I think there's some misunderstanding, and I would include me in that, misunderstanding about what the climate assessment is and isn't and when it's supposed to be done.
Yeah, I think the misunderstanding was about when the climate assessment is technically due. And the note that I have says that the planning board's climate assessment is required for the county council, not the public hearing or the county planning board decision. While it may be that the county planning staff hope to complete it sooner and had certainly looked forward to that analysis, it is actually required to only be provided to the county council 7 days before the vote.
Yeah, so that's what the county law says, and some of us may like that or not, which does leave us with the question,
how do we approach the climate impacts and the environmental impacts of this project. But I just wanted to clarify that point of fact for people so that you all understand where we are in the process. And that said, that's obviously something I'm concerned about. So I would like to point out one more thing on that topic, if I may, that just again, in case folks are not already aware of this, the county does have a new electrification construction code, so that any new construction for which a building permit is filed by a certain date, and I believe that date is December 26th, 1920, now I've got the years wrong. 2026, building permit, not site plan, not zoning requirement, not zoning decision, not planning amendment, has to comply with the electrification code, which I think is great. And it does mean that new construction in Montgomery County moving forward for the most part, because of course there's always exceptions, will be all electric. So that's a piece of the climate puzzle that maybe not everybody was aware of. So I wanted to put that piece of information out there too. So getting back to the information on the minor master plan, I also want to announce that the Long Branch Sligo Neighborhood Association is also going to have a meeting that will be more of a discussion. There will be a city staff presence, and I will be there, and that's Thursday the 10th in Hilton and Davis, the corner of Hilton and Davis, one of the lawns there. So there'll be, for people who are in Ward 2, at least 2 places you can go to ask questions and think about the implications of what's been proposed. And last but not least, Public Art, thank you for proposing that. I'm going to suggest that since we have a public art coordinator and an arts and humanities committee, that if you have some proposals that you want them to consider, that we wrap them in, and I'd be happy to help you do that. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure Councilmember Honzak, because I don't see Councilmember Honzak on my screen.
Oh yeah, where'd she?
Oh, I see your hand. Awesome. Do you have any comments?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I just want to thank everyone who came out today. I particularly want to thank those who came out from Ward 5, and I'm sorry that I can't be there face to face to shake your hand and hear you. It is a delight to see you here and present, and I know that means a lot of time that you've taken to get here, because I haven't seen you since November at council, and that speaks powerfully to me about how important the MMPA is to you. Mr. Masterson, Mr. Barnes, Mr. Dennis, I'm sorry I didn't catch your surname. I hope you'll leave it with someone on council so I can have it. And Mr. McGarry and your spouse. I want everyone to know who came out tonight. Your voices are extremely important to me. But as I said in some recent updates I sent out as well, I also want everyone to know that I work extremely hard, and I know my fellow council members do as well, to make sure that those who are not able to come out are also heard. And I consider it my duty to go out and seek those people out and hear directly from them to the greatest of my ability. And that is one reason why I am very supportive of the survey processes that were really deep and really extensive that the city undertook to try to reach the maximum representation of residents across the city. Because belonging is one of the most important priorities to me, that every single resident who lives here experiences a sense of belonging, and equity is extremely important to me. Quality housing matters to me, green space and recreation and climate resilience for those who are most impacted by climate change, to me, honestly, matter more than climate mitigation. People have to live somewhere in this world, and better that they live in our city where we have safeguards in place to protect those who live here and who will choose to live here in the future. And I am proud to say that, and I will be happy to have that conversation off the dais with residents. And in that spirit, I am very grateful to Mr. Jacobs for focusing us with great detail on the process by which we as council members and fellow residents can support one another in becoming educated about the MMPA process and supporting those from other language groups to get to the spaces where their voices can be heard and make sure that they have the translation in place to have their voices heard. So please be assured that we are reviewing the plan with fervor. That is why we asked for this time, this additional time, especially those of us who are newer on council. And while we may not be enjoying a week off of council, even though we are not going to be on the stage and on television, we are working very, very hard on our behalf to try to maximize and optimize our own understanding and share that with you in the process. So it is my goal to explore how we can get to yes on MMPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you. So in addition to the meeting that we're going to have here Wednesday, August 16th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. as a public informational meeting, the following week I will hold a virtual meeting for Ward 1 for you to provide me with any comments that you want to give to me. I do have to say that from my understanding, the planning staff aren't seeing a whole lot of comments being sent to them. The county planning staff are not seeing a lot of comments. So make sure that you're sending those comments off. I don't think that anybody here is at a point where they were ready to support this plan exactly how it was. We passed a resolution. I know that it's up on the city website on, it's resolution 2023-16 that specifically mentioned the parts of the plan that we weren't comfortable with and things that we were hoping that they would address in the final plan. We will, I'm pretty certain, still send off more comments specifically with work sessions that we would like to see them hold. Maybe ones to do with affordable housing, ones to do with workforce housing, ones to deal with the environmental impacts of the plan, one to do with stormwater management. And so, this is a draft that we are working with, not against, but with it. And, we're doing our best to help make it a really great decision for Takoma Park. So I had a really great time last night at National Night Out. For those of you that missed it, you missed a chance to do the wobble and the Cupid Shuffle with myself and the mayor. So maybe next year you'll be there. Tomorrow there's a play day for Ward 1 in Silver Spring Intermediate Park from 4 to 6 p.m. And so that's the Ward 1, the one that I will be hosting, as my fellow council members have also been hosting. And then in addition to that, I have a Ward 1 socializing event August 27th from 12 to 3 p.m. at my mom's house, which it'll be 7102 Maple Avenue. And I'll be providing tie-dyeing dye, and you bring the item that you want to dye, and I'll have Girl Scouts there to help you tie up your item. And as my events are always held for Ward 1, but all are welcome. So if anybody here would like to join us, I'd love to see you there. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. So I do want to echo my colleague's sentiment in appreciation of everyone that has come out tonight to express your concerns regarding the minor master plan, to express your desire and the advocacy around public art. We appreciate hearing from each and every one of you. As my colleagues have already mentioned, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, this is a bit of an iterative process. We voted to move forward a draft for public comment, right? And now we're getting the comments, right? And so the goal is to make sure that we are able to, during this comment period, do what we're doing now, which is review and deliberate and discuss
and offer recommendations to improve said plan that would ultimately go before the planning board. I want to stress my commitment. I know we've talked about recess a lot, but I don't really see much of a break for any of us. We just won't be here on Wednesdays, and I won't have a bright light shining in this particular eye that is preventing me from seeing today. But it is an opportunity for us to spend the necessary time with you all so that we're able to really glean what are some of the modifications that we want to recommend as a council. So I do just want to echo my colleagues in saying, please, please, please submit your comments. You know, it was said multiple times we could do this together, but as you know, the council has power, definitely does. In no way am I trying to minimize the power that we have, but you also have power. And so your comments that substantiate what we ultimately send forward is extremely helpful. So I do want to encourage people to continue to submit your comments through the official channel so that they could be a matter of public record. I also want to thank our staff, our city staff, who have been working tirelessly to try to put out fact sheets and information, and we'll be doing so over the course of August just to make sure that everyone kind of has information available, including, you know, fact sheets around ways of protections that we have as a city around affordable housing and how we may be able to, how we are making sure that we're able to maintain that. But other items have already been put out, like why do we need this plan? Why are we doing this? And they're putting out those types of resources on our website to really try to make sure that everybody is starting from the same base level understanding. So again, you know, I'll be at all of the meetings as much as my schedule can allow that are being hosted in the various wards. But also feel free to invite me to meetings that you all may be having. I'm happy over the course of August, as my schedule allows, to sit down with you all. And so with that, I'm going to give a shout out for all of the fabulous things that happened over this weekend. I had the chance, I want to thank staff, I want to thank OTBA. We were able to do the ribbon cuttings for People's Books and MotorCat. And we were able to cut the ribbon right before the storm, which is great. So Councilmember Fulcher and I had the ability to spend the storm in MotorCat, which is a great place to spend the storm. So want to thank everyone and definitely please go out and patron these businesses. People's Book is awesome. It's so reminiscent of the bookstores that I grew up in, being able to just kind of walk around and read. So I want to encourage everyone to go out. Also want to echo Councilmember Small and my appreciation of our city staff who managed the Ward 6 traffic meeting that happened on Monday evening. We had police, public works, Mr. Eubanks, and Councilmember Small is absolutely correct. The Ward 6 New Hampshire Gardens community has been struggling for quite some time due to Purple Line construction. And to hear 18,000 cars are traveling through Wildwood Drive every week just gives a really sobering fact to help us with really trying to make sure that we're doing what we need within that community to help reduce the volume of cars that are coming through. Also, National Night Out was amazing, 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 amazing. If you have not had an opportunity to attend a National Night Out, I want to encourage you to do so. We had wonderful staff that came out, DJ, so many resource tables. Mary Jane, I saw the Posna table. There was just such an opportunity for not only for kids to play and for us to be in fellowship with one another, but also a great opportunity for people to get access to resources and information. So I want to thank all of the staff that worked on that. And then lastly, on Sunday, the 6th, from 5 until 7 p.m., the Academy of American Poets Award will be given to the Tacoma Park Poet Laureate, Taylor Johnson, and it will be at People's Books at from 5 until 7. So I am excited to have the opportunity to go there to see Taylor get their award. But I also want to encourage people to come out as well and support our Poet Laureate. And with that, I will turn things over to Mr. Eubanks, our acting city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Good evening, members of the public. I have quite a few updates, some of them rather lengthy, so please bear with me. Councilmember DeBala, to address what you had brought up a little bit earlier regarding the storm and some of the impact. The city is aware of several downed trees at Tacoma Avenue and Buffalo Avenue, Sligo, and Aspen and Heather. I believe also at Cherry, a downed tree at Cedar, Holly, and then another at Maple. We haven't experienced a storm like this in quite some time. And so just wanted to make clear the process should someone encounter a downed tree and as you were driving across the city or in front of your own home. This is considered an emergency situation, and so you should notify the police. That's step one. Once the police are notified, the city will begin to triage. There's, just given our location and the fact that we are surrounded by multiple jurisdictions, and many of our streets are not necessarily City of Tacoma Park right-of-way, there's a significant amount of coordination that needs to happen. Not to mention that if a tree is involving a power line, also coordination that has to happen with PEPCO. The city nor the county is allowed to or should be touching a tree that has been wrapped up in a power line. It's a hazard, and the only entity that can manage that is PEPCO. So we do have to coordinate with the utility company as well as parking planning in some instances, as was the case for the tree that fell along Sligo. In terms of the maintenance for the trees that have now been cleared from the right-of-way, city staff over the next, hopefully this week, but perhaps going into next week, will be moving across the city to clear sidewalks and finish clearing roadways. So please be patient with us. We haven't seen this many downed trees in a very long time, not from one storm. But we are aware of the places where there's debris left, and we will be addressing it this week and next. I'll go and move on to some of the events that we have upcoming. I've mentioned several times now that on August 9th at 6 p.m. via Zoom, there will be a tenant opportunity to purchase webinar. The webinar provides tenants with information about funding for purchasing the buildings they currently live in. The link to the RSVP will be included in the city manager's comments posted tomorrow. On August 16th, I think this has been mentioned already, but there's a minor master plan amendment session here at the community center. It has been mentioned, so I won't go into any more detail. But to another one of Councilmember DeBala's points about Belford Avenue, we do have some news to share about the progress of that sidewalk. And this is an update from our public works staff. As a result of the total expenditure for the Hopewell-Kentland Larch Sidewalk Project, the balance of funding available for new sidewalks in FY24 has been reduced. There are no longer sufficient funds available to complete the Belford Place sidewalk in FY24. The Hopewell-Kentland Larch Sidewalk and Traffic Calming Project started in May and was completed in July. The original budget estimate for the sidewalk portion was $220,000. It did not include the cost of stormwater treatment nor some changes to the roadway. During construction, staff identified additional improvements which doubled the size of the planned stormwater treatment facility and its capacity and solved erosion problem along Larch Avenue. The final project cost was $344,000. The funds available for the project included $170,000 from the FY23 sidewalk budget, $81,000 from the stormwater budget. The remaining balance of $93,000 was paid for with FY24 new sidewalk budgets. The FY24 budget for new sidewalk and traffic calming was thus reduced to $200K. Excuse me, I misspoke. The FY24 budget for the new sidewalk and traffic calming was reduced to $200,000 as a part of the budget process. The expenditure for Hopewell-Kentland Larch sidewalk project leaves a balance of $107,000. The cost of the Belford Place sidewalk is a $160K plus an estimated $25 to $40K for stormwater treatment, which brings the total to $200,000. So short of what's available in the FY24 budget. So to date, given the expenditure and cost overruns for the Hopewell Kentland Larch project, there's not enough money to construct the Belford Place project sidewalk in FY24. So that's unfortunate news, but I did want to make particularly the residents of Ward 2 aware of that. There's also an update from the city's recreation department. The city is partnering with Montgomery Connects to offer another free Chromebook giveaway to those eligible. Montgomery Connects will be at the Rec Center on New Hampshire Avenue on this next Saturday, August 13th. The program is open to those 7 and older, and everyone receiving a Chromebook must be in attendance that day. Registration links are available on the city's website. The program is open to county residents, but the Recreation Department secured a number of spaces for city residents. The link will be included in tomorrow's city manager comments posted online. And then finally, I have an update on the library, which will also take me some time to get through, so again, bear with me. Mostly good news. We've been waiting for the construction to begin on the library project since October of last year. And the good news is that we anticipate, the project team does, that we will have finished the permitting process in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if all goes well. And this includes the infamous Department of Permitting Services permit related to the floodplain, and that is DPS from Montgomery County. In addition to the cost caused by the project delay, which is currently unknown, but we soon will know once we get some numbers from the contractor after the notice to proceed is issued. The DPS permit changes have resulted in what looks like will be somewhere between $500,000 and $550,000 worth of changes. This is all related to DPS permitting changes. This includes relocating the existing transformer in front of the police station to the backside of the community center in the parking lot, and some grading changes in front of the community center at the corner of Maple and Philadelphia, as well as a requirement to build a trench, all again to mitigate stormwater. And so these are changes from DPS that we really have no say in the matter, so essentially mandated by the county. Currently, the project team believes that the additional costs can be absorbed by the project contingency, but as the costs are better assessed by the project team, as well as the construction team, will have a better sense of how true that statement is. But it does look like it can be absorbed by the contingency at the moment. In terms of timing, assuming permitting is indeed completed in 3 weeks, we expect to issue the notice to proceed to the contractor, after which construction will formally begin. The NTP, the time between the issuance of the NTP and the construction start is about 3 weeks. And in that 3-week period, we will essentially do a communication blitz to all city residents. And that communication strategy will involve a series of flyers, mailed letters to residents across the city, including single-family and multifamily dwellings, property managers, parent-teacher associations, and principals. We'll also be issuing some flyers, have flyers available at the library, community center, recreation center. Again, those flyers will go out to principals and PTAs. We'll be including a ton of information on the city's website. There will be a weekly blog. We'll include a lot of information about the parking changes and the impact to the community center, as well as the community center services. Social media will, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as Nextdoor, we'll have a number of updates, again, bi-weekly or weekly, We'll also be sending emails and have an opportunity for residents to sign up for those emails. We'll include information in the Insider newsletter. There'll also be a QR code on various forms of print media that can be scanned to receive kind of the latest information. Around the site, we will have posters and notices posted on a regular basis with updates, and some information conveyed by City TV, both on YouTube and the library's webpage. Lastly,
So we have a couple of lights
Okay,
based on the
sure.
library.
All
I'm
right,
going to
I'll-
go in the order.
All right, sure.
All right, Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I have less about the back part, which sounds expansive, and more about the park and planning permitting components of this. So I just have some questions. I don't know if you have anybody on the line. I know you know these things, and so if it doesn't work out, we can talk about it later.
Okay.
The first thing that I wanted to know is that does this permitting include the backlog of permits that they had yet to rule on, in addition to changes or revisions to what they wanted you to do?
So, yes, the timeline that I'm speaking to includes the approval of all of the permits. The DPS permit is the permit that's acting as almost the keystone for the release of the others. So that one we expect within, optimistically within the next week, but I think also realistically within the next week. After that, there'll be what we assume will be another two and a half weeks of review. Once that permit is released, it'll allow kind of the completion of the other permits.
Okay, and then as far as that goes, one of the things that we had spoken about consistently around here, and that in your previous role and in this role we've talked about, is the relative recalcitrance of the permitting processes. And I know that when we submitted the original designs and permits for this, that one of the most important things was stormwater. And so I'm curious about the revision. And the reason why I'm curious is because I do know that there's a part of the process where, like, if they change all your stuff, they put like another $500,000 on you. But you already had a plan that you thought mitigated the thing. There's some wiggle room in there procedurally. And so I'm curious about whether or not the project team has said anything about those kinds of things, or if the project plan insurance or anything has a component of this. It's okay if you don't know the answer to either of those, and it's okay if it doesn't. I'm just asking.
The initial floodplain plan that was submitted to DPS accounted for all of the floodplain requirements. The changes from DPS are to account for what I would describe as long-standing concerns related to drainage around the site that DPS sees as an opportunity to correct via this project.
So with regard to that, is that particular manifestation related to pre-existing built environment or pre-existing landscape associated with this city?
It's a little bit of both. So the transformer, for instance, is set within the floodplain. So built environment within, I guess if you ask DPS, not ideal location for a transformer. And so the requirement is that the initial requirement was to raise the transformer, literally just lift it above the floodplain. The analysis from the architect and civil engineer is that by raising the transformer out of the floodplain, you also raise the floodplain. And so you end up having to,
Because philosophically, if it goes higher, then it's worse? Or, like, I don't understand what that means. Because if structurally, if the transformer is the issue and you're moving it, but the whole thing is a floodplain because of where it is, given where the creek is, I'm curious about why they would be asking for a trench in particular. And so
Two separate issues. So the trench is meant to alleviate some of the pooling that occurs at the corner of Maple and Philadelphia. So right now on along the Philadelphia side, my understanding is that when there's a rainstorm and a significant one, there's a significant amount of water that sits at that location. So the requirement from DPS is that corner be regraded, and to allow for the flow of water to essentially turn the corner, we need to have a trench from the corner of Maple and Philadelphia down to the bridge in front of the community.
Okay, so this is my last question about this. So are you saying then that that particular part of the design build is a part of like the landscaping structure or the improved or expanded thing?
Right.
And
So
that's the reason why they are attacking you on this corner?
The landscaping issue is related to the trench. The built environment issue, I would say, is related to the transformer.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, 3 things. First of all, thank goodness we have a contingency. Second has to do with trees. And third, let's do third first, has to do with the possibility of a public art project. So I have been speaking with the library director, who has now talked to the construction manager. They've said okay, that it's okay to use the fence to do a public art project similar to the one that was done when those of you who were around for the community center renovation, where community groups and youth groups and neighborhood groups would get to do a panel, put it up, and we'd have around the library construction a living space of public art. So that is in process. It's not finalized, but I'm feeling good enough about it with the library director's blessing to mention it publicly. So anyone who is interested in that, get a hold of me or the library director, and we'll go from there.
That was going to be my last point.
Oh, you were going to close out on the good news. I'm sorry for
I'm glad you
stealing your
mentioned it.
thunder. Yeah, so not to put in a downer, but can you speak to the plans for tree removal and landscaping so that people are not surprised when it starts to happen?
Yes.
Thank you.
I can, and we can also share this as a follow-up because I don't have the library director can speak more intelligently to this than I can. But as a result of the expanded footprint of the library, the trees that are currently between the front of the library and Philadelphia Avenue will have to be removed. This is something that we have shared extensively with the public to date, but have heard some concerns about it more recently. We have taken some steps to preserve, if you will, some of the trees in a different way. I mean, not preserve in a living sense, but to make positive use of the trees once removed. And so a part of the project is to repurpose the trees once taken down into some kind of furniture that will be included in the library itself. There's also a requirement to replant some of the trees around the city building, so we will be doing that as well. But it is unfortunately something that's going to be necessary because of the footprint of the tree. I think it'll be important for the library director, I think, to share some additional details, Councilmember DeBala. So I'll make sure that gets to council and is posted with the city manager's comments.
All right, so we're going to, okay, I will give folks a 10-minute break. I've gotten whispers from both directions, so we'll do a 10-minute break. All right, and then we'll deal with our voting.
All right. Let's get back to business. So next, we are going to enter into our voting session. Just as a reminder for my colleagues, the first item relates to the FY 2024 Stormwater Management Budget. So that means we need to vote to convene as a Stormwater Management Board. Do I have
Moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember DeBala.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember DeBala moves for us to convene as a Stormwater Management Board. Councilmember Gibson seconds. All those in favor of us convening as a Stormwater Management Board, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Do you have any opposed? Do we have any abstain? All right, so we are now the Stormwater Management Board. The item before us is the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 Stormwater Management Budget Amendment Number 1. Just want to confirm with our acting city manager, Mr. Eubanks, whether or not there have been any modifications since the first reading.
Yes, Mayor. I'll read the note that's included on the cover memo. Since the first reading, the budget amendment has been revised to remove the word carryover and to make some edits related to that change. The revised version is intended to be substantively the same as the ordinance presented and voted on for the first reading. A red line and clean version of the cover memo and ordinance have been provided.
Thank you so much, acting city manager Eubanks. Are there any, did I move for us to? We're in the stormwater budget. Okay. So would someone like to move the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 Stormwater Management Budget Amendment Number 1?
Moved.
Councilmember DeBala moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Gibson seconds. Are there any comments or questions regarding any changes? All right.
I have a comment. I would just like to say I appreciate that tremendously because, as you know, that whole carryover whatchamacallit is a bane of my existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, do we need to do a roll call on this one?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher?
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Yes.
Councilmember Honzak?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Aye.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye. Okay, we are no longer the Stormwater Management Board. Now we are addressing the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 Budget Amendment Number 1. Like to just quickly check with acting city manager Eubanks whether there were any substantial changes since the first reading.
The same note, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Would someone like to move the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 Budget Amendment Number 1?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Small moves, Councilmember Fulcher seconds. Are there any comments or topics for discussion on this one?
I would like to once again say I appreciate all of the eradications of the word carryover.
Thank you very much. All right. Would the clerk please call the roll on this one?
Councilmember Fulcher?
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson? Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Aye.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye. Okay, the next item on the list is the single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to sign a contract for an executive search firm to administer the recruitment of the new city manager. I'm going to turn things over to the acting city manager, Eubanks. Are there any points that you would like to raise on this one?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Would someone like to move the single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to?
Yes.
Thank
So
you
moved.
very much, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember, wait,
No, it's over there. It's fine. I just hit the thing on accident. I was just my random finger. Yeah.
was it, wait, we have to take a record of this.
Yeah.
So Councilmember DeBala moves. I thought I heard Councilmember Honzak seconding.
You did. Second.
Councilmember Honzak second. All right. Are there any comments or points of discussion on this one?
I have one here, and I would like to say that the process for drafting this particular resolution was completely and utterly collaborative, and the process by which we selected this person was fair and even, and however, just in good conscience, as a member of the committee, I'm just gonna vote against this because of the fact that I think that since they all said that we should just keep the one that we have, that I'm just not gonna vote for it. And so just so everybody knows, I'm completely down to be involved in the process and all that other stuff. It's just, is what it is.
Would
Thank
that
you.
be, would that be an abstain, perhaps?
I will abstain for you rather than say no.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. All right, so will the clerk please call the roll on this one?
Councilmember Fulcher?
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
I abstain.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye. All right. We are cooking with grease now. We're moving on to item number 4, resolution establishing the city council's goals and priorities for the management of the city. And I will say, folks should have received a revised draft of the resolution based on comments that were received from friendly amendments from council members Gibson and DeBala.
And so I think the changes are highlighted in.
They're marked on this.
They're marked on page 2. And the one change that went in earlier that I had suggested is on the first page, adding the housing and economic development plan into the 1, 2, 3, 4th whereas, and putting in some of the dates and resolution specifics that have been requested. So that was one change. And then the other 2 proposed friendly amendment changes are on page 2.
And
One
I
is
just-
in the last whereas, and which is to expand a little bit on why the position is challenging and exciting. So not just the populace, but also the extensive programming and the long-term fiscal challenges. So that's one change, suggested change. And the second change is just to put the word collaborative in resolved, which is, and that's it, right?
And I just wanted to say that those are completely friendly amendments
Okay.
and
I-
completely like make it a better document.
Thank you. There was one edit that I had suggested, which I will hold up and see if there's interest in on the last page. The 5th bullet downs, engage city staff, et cetera. Second line, understand the importance of consensus, and I had suggested, and healthy debate. And, but
I
it
would
didn't
lead
make it in here.
debate. I'd lead debate over consensus. So let's not quibble about what we have here.
I would have said, if I'll go ahead and motion that it be included and see if I get a second. We'll see how it goes. But
Yeah,
my
that's fine.
thinking is that, we want to get consensus, but we also encourage healthy debate. And they seem to be, help each other.
Oh, you're right. I think I understand what you're saying. We're striving toward consensus.
Consensus.
But we don't mind if we are talking about.
We actually want to encourage healthy debate,
Solid.
actually.
Some All right. people
may want to abstain.
Yeah. Okay. Get it. I got it. Solid.
So,
Okay.
there was a second, or?
All right, so I'm gonna put what I'll need to do is first, let's put this on the table as amended. And then you'll make your motion for your friendly amendment, and then we'll amend it if it's voted on.
Yeah.
And then we'll move the whole thing. All right. So would someone like to move the resolution establishing the city council's goals and priorities for the management of the city?
So moved.
Councilmember Small moves, Councilmember DeBala seconds. Okay. And do we have an amendment?
I would like to make an amendment to the 5th bullet on the last now therefore section. I will read it, and engage staff, city council, and other elected officials and members of the community. Understand the importance of consensus, and my suggestion is consensus and healthy debate, and of the transparency in decision-making. I guess if there's a...
Can we get rid of one of the ands?
Yeah, as many
So-
ands as you want to get rid of.
Engage staff, city council, and other elected officials and members of the community. Understand the importance of consensus, healthy debate, and of transparency in decision-making.
Yep, that's what I would like to have.
Okay. We have a motion amendment on the table. All those in favor of the amendment?
Second, do we have a second?
Do we have a second? Oh, Councilmember Gibson, I'm sorry. We moved your amendment. Councilmember Small has seconded
Seconded.
it. Okay, so all those in favor of the adding the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed?
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala opposes?
I abstain.
Councilmember Fulcher abstains? Okay. All right, so it passes. So just want to,
Okay.
okay, so now we are voting on the item as amended. All right, so this is a resolution, so we could do a,
Vote in there?
she said aye.
Okay, I didn't hear that.
All right, so we're gonna vote on the resolution establishing the city council's goals and priorities for the management of the city. All those in favor of the resolution as amended, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? All right, so it passes. All right, so we have the consent agenda that we're voting on. The first item is a resolution providing for the city council summer recess from August 3rd to September 6th. The resolution providing for appointments and reappointments to the Arts and Humanities Committee. Resolution providing for reappointments to the Board of Elections. Resolution providing for reappointments to the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs. Resolution providing for appointments, reappointments to the Emergency Preparedness Committee. Resolution providing for reappointments to the Grants Review Committee. Resolution providing for appointments, reappointments to the Recreation Committee. Resolution providing for appointments, reappointments to the Sustainable Maryland Committee. And resolution providing for reappointments to the Tree Commission. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Honzak seconds. I think I heard Councilmember Siemens first.
Second or so.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Honzak moved. Councilmember Siemens second. All right. Are there any points of discussion regarding the consent agenda?
Yes, the subcommittee, subgroup wanted to just go over a couple of things from last week so that you all know what you're voting on. And I think that was Councilmember Fulcher going to start first with a summary of the different committees? Or are we going to go straight just to the one?
I think we're just going, because we went over most of that.
Okay,
We weren't
so,
here, but-
yeah, so you all got a copy of a one-pager that lists by committee, what appointments are being made by, and the names and a link to everybody and all of that. So if there are any questions on all of those, you could ask them now. But what we wanted to do was to specifically address a couple of committees where we're recommending as a subgroup that we not make appointments. One of them is the Recreation Committee, where there are two people who had been on the committee for a long time. They were taking the required one-year hiatus, and they were proposing to come back. And we, as a committee, talked to them and suggested that it would probably be healthier for the group to spend a little more, leave those two seats vacant and spend a little more time recruiting for some fresh energy on the committee, and that seemed to be acceptable to everybody concerned. So that's one place where people applied, and we are recommending not having, I guess in those case those are technically reappointments. In the second case, the Nuclear Free Committee, should I just go ahead and, okay. We were gonna divvy it up, but we're on a roll here, so. The subgroup wants to emphasize that, again, the city continues to be committed to our status as a nuclear-free zone, that is, and implementing that status. So that's not the question. The question is whether a standing resident committee is the most effective way to do that. So in looking at it closely, looking at the 2021 City Council review of all committees, commissions, boards, and commissions and boards, looking at the factors that they applied at that point to the different groups in terms of whether the work supports the council priorities. whether the issue is best addressed by a standing committee or some other way, whether ongoing attention as opposed to occasional attention is needed, whether staff has the capacity to support the group, whether the technical expertise and lived experience from residents is needed, whether the issue is relevant and important to residents, and whether there is no other existing entity to do the work. Those were the factors that the 2021 subgroup looked at, every single committee, commission, and board, and made recommendations. So we looked at their recommendations. We looked at the Sustainable Banking Task Force. We had some back and forth with the Nuclear Free Committee and got their point of view and so forth. So to be succinct, the subgroup concluded that ongoing attention from a standing resident committee isn't needed to fulfill the priority of a nuclear-free zone for the city, and that there are other ways to do it. So we also continue to be concerned about building resident groups that closely reflect the diversity of our residents, and despite sincere and intense efforts by committee members, by city council members, by city staff, and through 4 rounds of recruitment, this committee has increased its potential membership, but has not, in our view, approached the diversity of our residents compared to what all the other city committees, commissions, and boards have been able to do. So for those 2 reasons, and based on the previous efforts going before us, we are recommending to not make the appointments that at this time, and instead to ask the city attorney to develop code language, as we have done with other committees that were sunsetted, to look at those sections of the code, to develop language, to assign the tasks that are still relevant from 1982 to others, in many cases to those who are already doing them. So that would mean that we come back to this in the fall with some actual code language that we would be looking at and voting on whether to make those code changes or not. And in the meantime, not making appointments. So I hope I explained that quickly and succinctly, Mayor.
Yes. Thank you very much. Councilmember Gibson?
Just a consideration, given the work that these folks have done, is there some way that we can recognize them with a?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not sure when, but they carried the water for us for a very long time,
Yes.
and we need to really, I think, recognize
I think
that
that's
effort.
right. Yes.
That's well heard, Lynn.
Agreed.
That's well said.
All right. Okay. So we have the consent agenda that has been moved. It's open for discussion. We've discussed it. And now we are moving to a vote. All right. So,
No, all in favor.
going to the city attorney on,
Consensus on that, because that's not in the consent agenda.
that's not in the consent agenda.
You could have that as a separate standing motion.
Yeah.
You could do it immediately after.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert's rules, baby.
Cindy, thank you for catching that, because it is important that
Yeah,
we
it is.
move it to the attorney and that we get it done. So thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're going to vote on the consent agenda, and it sounds like there's going to be another motion that will follow the vote on the consent agenda. It has already been moved. All right. The consent agenda. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Do I have any opposed? Do you have any abstain? Okay. Now, Councilmember DeBala, let's make your motion.
Do you want to do it? No, you do it. Okay. Somebody help me here. So I move that we we seek the city attorney's guidance on code language for assigning the still relevant tasks, committee tasks for the Nuclear Free Committee to other
Municipal functions.
to municipal functions to other groups.
Okay.
Groups and/or individuals.
So just making sure that we have.
Reassign, that's a little better.
Second.
Yep. All right. So Councilmember DeBala has made a motion for the council to direct the city attorney to assess and reassign code changes, code language, and reassign municipal functions that are currently with the Nuclear Free Committee. Is that correct? Okay. And Councilmember Small has seconded. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any
Aye.
opposed? And any abstain? Okay, so the motion moves to direct the city attorney to do this assessment, and it's on his list, so I think he'll be happy to know that we can move something forward.
Is it too late to change my vote on going on recess?
Let's just stay.
No.
That would be a motion to reconsider. And I don't think we could do that. So-
All right, so now
Coaching on the side there.
we've made it through the 10-item voting session. So now we are moving into our work session. And so with that,
Just with congratulations to all of the people who have been appointed or reappointed, and the city clerk will be getting in touch with you sometime soon.
all right. And so with that, I will turn the discussion over to Acting City Manager Eubanks to go through our last work session item, which is the quarterly financial report for the fourth quarter.
Make this snappy dated.
Okay, I will be rather quick, I think.
The computer.
The quarterly financial reports, fortunately, are pretty straightforward. They primarily discuss revenue and expenditure. This quarterly financial report covers the entire year, so the beginning of the fiscal year, January 1, 2022, to the close of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2023. So the financial reports are a summary of revenue and expenditure, including all budget amendments. One of the things that the financial report is helpful for is identifying any discrepancies between fiscal years. So if you recall from the first presentation we did for Q3, we were able to look at the same point in time and compare FY22 to FY23 and identify any differences and then talk about those significant differences. And we'll do something similar today. And finally, they enable the inquiry and investigation of inconsistencies. So those inconsistencies that exist in the comparison, those are the things that we talk about. The limitations are the same as they were for the last quarterly report and will be the same. It is a retrospective review. So obviously, it's not real time. It's not to-date data. It's data that was collected up until the 30th of 2023. So it is missing the period of time that we're in now, which is kind of the unofficial point at which we are still collecting both revenues and expenditure. So there's a 60-day period in which we're allowed to, our finance team allows us to collect invoices and attribute those invoices to what is technically the former fiscal year. It's of course not an audit, and so kind of reiterating the same point here. And as I said, this is a review that is not inclusive of all of the data. So our technical ending date is the 1st of September. There are embedded within the operations of our financing, both on the revenue and expenditure side, some irregularities. So we talked about, to some degree last time we spoke, that there are expenditures and revenues that come in at certain points in time. So revenues that are month to month, revenues that are quarterly, revenues that are lump sum. And so you see that less in the fourth quarter. In most cases, most of the revenues that we expect to receive and most of the expenditures we expect to receive have been received, but there's still some, particularly those that we receive from other jurisdictions or other levels of government that have not yet been collected. And so we'll talk about that as well. And still, because there's some unpredictability in what will come in kind of these last 60 days, it is still an imperfect forecasting tool. We have, a better lens because most of the year is behind us, but we still are unsure to some degree. This slide I won't go into in great length, but this is just a reminder of the types of revenue that we receive and the ways in which they're received. Okay, just a brief overview. So the left-hand side of your screen is a review of all funds. So it's inclusive of the general fund, which is where the bulk of our operations are managed, the stormwater fund, speed camera fund, ARPA. It does not include reserves. Reserves are not a part of the analysis of the financial report because it does not deal with revenues and expenditures. So total revenue for all funds budgeted was $42.7 million. Total expenditure budgeted is $56.6 million, which would require a reserve contribution of $13.9 million. That includes $5 million in bond reserves. According to the data collected as of June 30th, 2023, total revenues received reflect about 95% of those budgeted, so $40.7 million. Total expenditure at about 63%, which is $35.8 million, which results in a $4.8 million excess of revenues over expenditure, which is primarily due to unspent ARPA funds. So the next bullet point here is removing ARPA funds, and you see that with ARPA funds removed from the calculation, we have about an $8,000 surplus in the general fund and deficits in other funds. So the special revenue fund has a deficit of $79,000, $241,000 deficit for a stormwater fund, and then the one that was not planned is $352,000 deficit for the speed camera fund, and we'll talk about or reiterate, because we talked about this at Q3, why that deficit exists. The general fund is, of course, where we like to focus because it is, again, where most of the operations occur. And so the budgeted general fund amount, $27.3 million, expenditure budgeted $36.6, with an expected reserve contribution of $9.3 million. According to the financial report, revenues received are 103% of what was expected, so $28.2 million, and expenditures are 77% of what was expected, leaving that $8 million. Excuse me, that should be 8. I wish it was $8 million in excess. It's 8,000 in excess of expenditures. Yeah, that will be corrected before published on the website, and below you'll see a chart reflecting the same. If you're following in the financial report, I'm on page 4 and focusing specifically on revenues. Again, revenues for the general fund are 103% of the budget, which amounts to about $876,121 more than what was expected. And this can be summarized from 4 points. Income is higher, income tax is higher than expected by about $340,000. The use of money and property, which is effectively the interest income, I'm sure we all know, as most of us have experienced, at the time that the budget was developed, interest rates were drastically different than they are now. And so as a result of those interest rates rising, our interest income has gone up significantly. And so we are experiencing a surplus of almost $200,000 as a result of that. The housing reserve, or housing fund revenue is increased by $200,000, increased from zero. This is a reimbursement that we receive from the state for dollars that were spent from the housing reserve. So in FY24, this $200,000 was replaced or put back into the reserve. And then the $139,000 from police protection is a grant that we apply to and receive annually. I believe, and Director Chung is with us and she can correct me if need be, but that grant I think is based on expenditure from either the year before or several years before. And so it was projected at a certain amount and actual amount received is a little bit higher. We've received considerably less revenue in a couple of areas, highway taxes, cable franchise fees, and cable operating. That is essentially a result of those revenues not being distributed to the city yet. As is the case for personal property tax, admission and amusement, Tacoma Langley agreement, which is an agreement for that provides revenue for recreation, and in total we expect to receive at least $21,000, and the kind of that minimum is set by just knowing that the amount to be received via that Tacoma Langley agreement is $21,000. All of the other items are a bit unpredictable. We don't know exactly how much we'll receive in personal property tax, and there's no way to tell exactly how much we'll receive from admission and amusement. But historically, we expect, because of kind of past precedent, to receive additional funds in Q4.
David, that's just you being kind of hedging your bets, right? Like, could you provide an estimate of where historically those numbers have been, or no? It's okay.
I don't think that we could get very accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'm on page 6 and 7 of the finance report, and now looking at expenditures. And you'll see some significant deviations in the city manager's office, human resources, police, and recreation. First, dealing with the city manager's office, for FY23, you'll see that we exceeded the budget by $42,000. That is a result of temporarily having 2 deputies in that office, which was not expected at the beginning of the year. In human resources, you'll see a significantly lower rate of expenditure. So in FY23, expenses were 49% of budgeted. At this point, the same point in time in FY22, we were at about 85% of expenditure. And this is something that you just approved, a result of not fully implementing the new HRIS system. So a part of your First Amendment was the reallocation of those dollars to continue the implementation of that project in FY24. Moving on to public safety, which is the line item that's associated with our police department, you'll see that we exceeded the budget in total by, well, not the total budget, a line item within public safety by about $150,000. This is due to 2 issues. One is a miscalculation of salary and fringe of about $120,000, and then a misattributed expense, several misattributed expenses to conferences and I can't remember the other category, but they total $30,000. So that will and can be switched to the appropriate fund, and so that line item will no longer be an overage. The public safety kind of category in total is not it does not exceed its budget. It's just this particular line item exceeds its budget, and so worth kind of pointing out why. Also within the public safety category of expenses is the investigation services. That also exceeds the budget by $65K, and similarly, that is due to a miscalculation of salaries, fringe, and overtime. But again, the public safety category of expenses at June 30th, 2023 does not exceed the budget. For recreation, a minor excess of expenses compared to what was budgeted for. And again, if you look at recreation as a category, the total budget does not exceed, but because this line item is relatively significant, it's worth mentioning. The excess of $22K for camps is largely a result of not knowing exactly how many participants we were going to have participating in our camps coming out of COVID. And so we received more participants than we expected, and because of that needed to change our staff to participant ratio. And so that was a increased cost to salaries, overtime, and I think a little bit of fringe.
That's going to be my favorite exceeding part. Yeah, I
It-
mean that's
it-
not
it is
terrible.
a
positive reflection.
Yeah.
Without saying too much about it, there's a lot of one department on that page.
And then looking specifically at some of the other funds outside of the general fund, I won't focus on, haven't focused in the presentation on the special revenue fund, because as you all know, that is primarily grants, or is exclusively grants. And so deficits or overages are really just the receipt or non-receipt of reimbursements. So it doesn't affect the city's coffers in any way. Those are grant dollars that we have or have not received, which should be rectified over time. But focusing a little bit on the stormwater fund expenditures, you'll see that in FY23, revenues were $772,000 collected, which represents about 101% of what was budgeted. On the expenditure side, council had kind of built in a deficit here of some amount. I can't do the math offhand. I guess it's approximately $603,000. But the difference between the revenues and expenses here, expenditure being $1.4 million, which represents about 73% of what was budgeted, ultimately results in something along the lines of $600,000 worth of deductions in the stormwater fund. And that, is a decision that was made, I guess, throughout the year, because it does include budget amendments. But essentially, we have decided as a collective to pursue some stormwater projects this year that resulted in deduction from the overall stormwater balance. And kind of knowing that going into FY24, the budget was a balanced budget. There was technically a deficit of about $3,000, which I think is a negligible amount. But after the passage of the budget amendment and rolling over the excess funds, reallocating the excess funds from FY23 to FY24, specifically for the one project that had begun in 23 and needs to conclude in 24, the effect of that is that there will now be a larger deficit in FY24. But I think it's important to point out that the ending balance as a result of that carryover, or as a result of that reallocation, is the same, because those dollars are just moving from one fiscal year to the next fiscal year. I hope I explained that well enough. Okay.
Yeah, you did great explaining that. And I think, one of the things that I'm walking away from this quarterly report, even though I know we need to wait for the next one before we can actually know what a lot of the actuals of 23 are. But it does help for folks to understand
that, you know, the budget deficits versus the actuals, there are differences and things sometimes balance out in the end. And it does kind of seem like, as I'm looking through, although there's some things that make me a little nervous, it does look like FY23's budget versus the actuals may find themselves balancing out in the end. But I know we won't know for sure until we actually get our auditing results back. But it does look a little less grim than I would think. And so, you know, even though we had to push something forward that could potentially cost additional funds for 24, and we're again starting off kind of where we typically start off in a budget deficit. We do need to be mindful over the course of the years we're making our decisions around how to ensure that things kind of balance out in the end.
Yeah, and that's, I think, to your point, Mayor, that was, as we've talked about before as a group, was something that we were very concerned about during the budget amendment process. And we wanted to make sure that any project that was reallocated from year to year was an active project or a program project, not dollars that were just kind of excess dollars that could be kind of reallocated for non-specific purpose. We didn't want to kind of get into the same conundrum that I think we've experienced before.
Yep.
And then for the last of the funds that we'll talk about before we kind of conclude for the evening is the speed camera fund. And this I think is the one where we are experiencing kind of the biggest setback, for lack of better words, and the numbers kind of speak for themselves here. So in the revenue category, we were projecting for FY23 to receive $1.9 million, and the actual received is closer to $700,000. And so we're talking about what amounts to about 28% of what's been collected. I think it's actually 36%, so that 28% will need to be corrected. But 30% of what was projected. But on the expenditure side, I guess fortunately, we're also seeing a lower amount of expenditure. Nonetheless, we are seeing a pretty significant deficit in the stormwater fund. And that is primarily for two reasons. One, we expected that the red light camera program would be up and running by now. This is a new program that would bring a significant amount of revenue to the city. Unfortunately, throughout the year, there were a lot of delays, and that program is still not up and running. I talked to the chief earlier this week, and we do expect it to be up and running within the next couple of months, I'll say, before the end of the year. I think I could say with some confidence. And so we do expect for FY24 to begin to see some of those revenues kick in. But unfortunately, not having it in 23 resulted in a pretty significant deficit. And so the balance for the speed camera fund is going to be somewhere in the range of $660 some odd thousand. Going into FY24, though, we didn't kind of arrange the FY24 budget in the same way that we arranged the FY23 budget, in that we were kind of swapping expenses between funds. And so if you recall in FY23, we had allocated $300,000 in sidewalk projects, again anticipating some additional revenue,
right,
not realizing that $300,000 has kind of now come back to bite us. And so in FY24, we didn't move any funds that are typically associated with the general fund or others into the speed camera fund. And so we will actually realize a surplus in FY24. So that balance, that fund balance will go up in FY24.
Acting City Manager Eubanks, I think Councilmember Small has a question.
Yes, thank you. I have a question about this particular thing. I can't remember, but is our speed camera and red light camera system process bespoke? Like we're running all of that ourselves? Or do we have a vendor that runs that for us?
There's a vendor, Conduit. I don't know the specifics of how the, if the equipment is rented or if it's purchased, but I do know Conduit is the entity that manages the process for us.
Okay. If you have the availability of the information about what the relationship is between the vendor and maintenance of those cameras and or placement of the new ones, I'd really like to know, because historically, in my own experience, it's the easiest process to get money is the speed cameras and red light cameras, because they will come and do all of the stuff for you and send you a check. And so I'm curious about this.
Yeah, the delay on the speed camera fund is not one associated with our vendor. If my understanding is correct, it's one associated with the state. And so I think, and we're not the only ones in this boat. So there are other jurisdictions in the area that are also having challenges getting their speed camera program up and running. Not because of the jurisdictions themselves, but because of the approvals from levels of government.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I wanted to just focus on this speed camera fund for right now. First of all, I want to make sure I understand what this is saying. It says of which 28% or 36% has been collected. Is that a delay in the collection process, or is that because the violations have been lower?
That is because the speed camera or red light camera program is not up and running. So the dollars not collected are primarily a result of that new revenue source not being realized.
Okay, but the speed camera program has been running for years.
Right, but the speed camera fund now includes, in theory, speed camera revenue and red light camera revenue.
Okay.
The red light camera is not up and running. That represents a larger portion of the speed camera fund now. So because those dollars weren't realized, the amount collected is significantly less than it would have been in past years, because those fees are not accounted for in past years.
So we didn't get the additional.
That's right.
Funds. Okay. Well, that's good news and bad news. I was ready to throw a block party because our safety had, increased so significantly, but
yeah.
Okay.
The other piece of that I hadn't gone into yet, but there was a maintenance issue with several cameras, and so that the actual dollars weren't received, which is also reflected in the lower collection rate. We have been compensated via a credit from Conduit for their services, and that's you can't account for that as revenue, but it essentially works the same way.
Right,
So
you got the
we haven't
money.
received the funds, but we've been compensated for the delay or the issue.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I will just move on to kind of the summation of the conversation today. In general, there are no significant deviations from annual trends, specifically concerning the general fund, but there will be a significant unplanned reduction in the speed camera fund in FY23, but recovery in FY24. If you look at the chart below, you'll see kind of a historical analysis from FY20 19 up until FY22. The intent of including that here is mostly to show the city's execution rate. So if you look at the total expenditure, which incorporates both the operating expenditure and the CIP expenditure, you'll see a percentage that ranges from, if you exclude FY23, that ranges from 78 to 88%. for the last couple of years, that's been where we've executed our actual budgets compared to our budgeted budgets. I wanted to make that a part of kind of this conclusion because I think you can expect reasonably that we'll see something around 85% execution as a best guess. And so if that were the case, total expenditures for the year would end at about $31.1 million, which if you compare that to the budgeted totals for the year, the estimated totals at the beginning of the year, and compare kind of what that would mean from a reserve perspective, it would mean that we are about $3.5 million, withdrawing about $3.5 million from our reserve, less than we assume we would, which is good news. So I guess I'll pause there, and if there are any additional questions, please let me know. And we should also have Director Chung available as well.
What? No lights? Is everyone just like school's out for summer? Is that where everyone is?
Councilmember Honzak has a question.
Okay, Councilmember Honzak.
Hi, I can't see myself, but I'm going to assume that I'm on video. I just want to thank you for that fantastic presentation. It was extremely lucid, and I've been waiting just to be able to say that with the numbers and the explanations that you've been giving us. I really, really appreciate the way you explain budgets. I was going to suggest, I particularly thought that last slide you just showed us was so enlightening. And the way you explained it verbally is also really, really helpful. And I wonder whether you might consider putting something about this at some point in the near future into, for example, the city paper, and trying to provide the kind of explanation that you just gave us. I don't know whether you feel like you could distill that, but if you could, in the way that you communicate, I think it would be really helpful to residents as an education exercise.
Director Chung, are you with us? Yes, she is. Here she comes. Director Chung, I don't know, and maybe you do, if there around the audit, if there is a anything that we include in the newsletter about kind of the end of the year status once the numbers are completely final. Is that typically a process for us?
The information on the last chart, on the last page of this presentation, is actually retrieved from the annual financial comprehensive report. And there is a particular page on the financial report that actually compare our adopted budget against our final budget towards the actual expenditure. And it shows the execution rate of our CIP expenditure, operating expenditure, as well as the total expenditure. So that particular table or chart in our comprehensive report is very helpful for us to understand how does the execution rate help to save our bottom line of the city, because we were expecting to spend more than supposed to be, because the execution rate was about 78 to 85%. That's why we spent less than what we expected.
And in terms of sharing the information, I know the audit is presented to council in, I think it's November. How do we share the information publicly to residents?
The auditor usually have a presentation, and then that presentation will include mainly the general fund, and then tells us the past 3 years revenue, receipt, expenditure, as well as the trend of our unassigned reserve. And essentially it's similar to this particular chart and telling us what is our actual execution rate for expenditure.
So, Councilmember Honzak, I think I'm uncertain how we have shared end of the year information before, but I agree with you that it does make a lot of sense to explain it in great detail to the public, and I think city staff would be very much interested in trying to share that information in a newsletter. My concern is that it would, I think, be most helpful to share the end of the year after it's actually closed out, rather than to share the fourth quarter, because it is still very nebulous. And so, I would expect then that we could share at the top of the year kind of the closeout from the fiscal year prior.
And I completely concur. So thank you for asking for clarification on that from Director Chung. I guess what I'm partially commenting on is I think you do a very effective job of simplifying and distilling the information verbally, and in so much as a letter from the city, the acting city manager might be a really with a chart such as this one that I think for a lot of people who maybe don't deal with budgets every day might not be that familiar when they just look at it or hear about it in some more technical terminology. I think the way you just explained this in very simple terms is very useful as to give people the big picture, but for sure after the final audit. Thank you.
And that's good feedback, because we are also actively working to make some clarifying statements in the financial report itself. So one of the updates from the last presentation is a description of some of the differences in revenue. I know when we had spoken about this in Q3, I had done a lot of the kind of explanation of this, and it wasn't in the report itself. But I do think it's helpful, to your point, to have the info and the kind of the analysis of it in the report itself for readers that may not be all that up to speed on our inner workings, which is probably most folks. So I think we'll continue to try to incorporate that kind of analysis in the financial report.
Great. All right. Well, I just want to thank you again, Acting City Manager Eubanks. This has been a really, as Councilmember Honzak said, very clear. And I do think that once we have the actuals alongside the fact that we are moving forward in terms of the different budgeting, tools around community engagement, and as we are preparing for the next round of budget, which will happen in the fall, or at least we'll start working on some things in the fall. I think that, figuring out ways to kind of communicate these different pieces in a staged approach might be really helpful, especially as we get ready to enter into the crux of a lot of our budget discussions that happen early in the year. So definitely appreciate all of the hard work that you and Director Chung have done on trying to really simplify and clearly communicate the current fiscal health of the city, and definitely appreciate your willingness to work towards trying to increase levels of communication with the community about it. And so with that, I think we are all done for the night, and we are.
I don't understand what number 7 is on here.
You have an old version.
Oh, okay, great.
Would you like to stay longer or no?
No. We're all
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And this meeting is adjourned, and the council is officially on recess. Thank you all so much.